Stratégie et la politique de puissance. Au revoir.
With Radio Algeria International, you will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Participants to the ministerial meeting of the Tokyo International Conference on African Development have decided on the issue of the participation in favor of the Sahrawi side. And in Lebanon, at least 3 people were killed in airstrikes carried out overnight by the Israeli occupation against the country's southern regions. More air raids have been carried out by the Israeli occupation against various parts of Gaza, killing and wounding scores of Palestinians. Those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. Good afternoon. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has offered his condolences to the Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the Brotherly State of Palestine, Mr. Mohammed Mustafa, following the death of the Palestinian leader and activist Farouk al-Qadoumi. In a message of condolences, Mr. Attaf conveyed his deep sympathy to his Palestinian counterpart, to the family of the deceased, and to the brotherly Palestinian people. The Algerian minister also praised the deeds of the deceased, which will remain engraved in his people's memory to pursue the process of liberation through the establishment of an independent and sovereign Palestinian state with Al-Quds as capital. And on the 10th day of the electoral campaign, the candidates running for the September 7th presidential election have called on the voters to exercise the right to vote, stressing the importance of each vote in the democratic process. Mariam Barshi has the details.
The Socialist Forces Front FFS candidate Youssef Aouchi said during a meeting held in Stif that everyone has a responsibility and every Algerian must be involved in the process of change to build a strong Algeria with institutions that draw their legitimacy for the sovereignty of the people. While explaining his program, the FFS candidate considered that his project, named Vision for Tomorrow, is a set of political and institutional reforms aiming to establish an efficient governing system that gives the Algerians the hope of living in dignity. The FFS campaign director for the province of Tizi Ouzou, for his part, held a meeting in Bouzguene where he explained the stake of the election for the future of the country, as well as the key points of Mr. Aouchi's program, which offers answers to the many expectations of the Algerians and is capable of achieving development and prosperity, emphasizing the interest and place given to the young people. Meanwhile, the independent candidate Abdelmajid Tebboun's campaign director, Mr. Brahim Merad, called during a meeting held in Tlemcen on the citizens to massively go to the polls on September 7th to elect the independent candidate Abdelmajid Tebboun in order to complete his efforts in the building of the new Algeria. Mr. Merad, who also held community activities in Mascara and Sidi Bel Abbas, said that Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboun would work to relaunch the national economy and enhance the major economic achievements made during his first term as president. He added that Mr. Tebboun will also be working to create new delegate provinces as part of a new administrative division of the country, which enshrines the principle of bringing citizens closer to the administration. For his part, the candidate of the Movement of the Society for Peace, MSP, Mr. Abdelhali Hassani Sharif, for his part, called on the citizens at a rally held in the province of Tlemcen to massively go to the polls on September 7th to vote for him and give him the opportunity to put his program into practice. He affirmed that his program focuses on a set of political and socio-economic objectives, including the anchoring of democracy and pluralism, the implementation of development projects in the country, as well as the promotion of social solidarity and the role of young people and women. For the MSP candidate, Algeria has a great potential to become a leading country, expressing the will to carry out economic, social and cultural reforms. Mr. Abdelhali Hassani Sharif stressed the need to rehabilitate the air, land and sea transport network to make it easier for the citizens to travel, to encourage agricultural investment, and to promote tourism.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and to Lebanon now. At least 3 people were killed in airstrikes carried out overnight by the Israeli occupation against the country's southern regions. The health ministry was quoted by the media as saying that 2 other people were wounded in the attack that hit a village as well as a vehicle in a neighboring village. According to the same source, the attacks regularly launched by the Israeli army against Lebanon's southern part claimed over 600 lives since last October. More than 1,800 others have been wounded in the Israeli bombardments that caused the displacement of over 110,000 people. This came as both the UN Coordination Office and the UN Interim Force in Lebanon stressed the necessity to abstain from any new escalation and to cease fire. Earlier, the Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati called for a de-escalation, stressing that it is urgent to stop Israel's aggression against Lebanon and urged for the implementation of UN Resolution 1701. Evoking a possible escalation in the situation in Lebanon, political analyst Suhail Diab had the following.
It's possible that the United States will get involved in a regional confrontation in case the United States does not succeed in imposing a solution to the Palestinian issue that guarantees the interests of the United States and Israel. Hence, these shuttles and pressure, Blinken's recent visit and its outcome, and these American moves in order to reach a result. It's possible to impose a solution suitable to the size of the United States and to its interests and the interests of Israel. If this is not possible, I don't exclude that the United States will come to the conclusion that a regional confrontation is necessary and will directly participate to resolve many things it sees regressing, not in the interests of the United States in the Middle East.
That was political analyst Suhail Diab. And more air raids have been carried out by the Israeli occupation against various areas of Gaza, killing and wounding scores of Palestinians. The news agency Wafa stressed that over 70 people were killed and over 110 others wounded in the Israeli bombardments that mainly hit the central region of Deir al-Balah. Still in the Palestinian file and the Gaza ceasefire and prisoners, negotiators have discussed new compromise proposals in Cairo seeking to bridge gaps between the Israeli occupation and Hamas. The talks in Cairo didn't make any progress as the Israeli occupation is insisting on keeping 8 positions along the Philadelphia corridor. The Hamas movement representative to Algeria, Youssef Hamdan, for his part, stressed that more negotiation rounds will allow the occupation to commit more massacres against the Palestinian people.
The Hamas delegation, led by Dr. Khalil Hayyan, listened to the Egyptian and Qatari mediators in Cairo concerning the outcome of the negotiations and the previous rounds held with the Israeli occupation. The Hamas movement reiterates its attachment to the roadmap presented on July 2nd, which it approved, and calls for the implementation of the United Nations Security Council resolution and putting the Biden speech and principles into a concrete form. More time and more negotiating rounds will simply allow Netanyahu to commit further massacres against our Palestinian people.
Let's recall that the Hamas delegation arrived in Cairo today to review any proposals that emerged in the main talks between the Israeli occupation and the mediators, namely Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. Participants to the ministerial meeting of the Tokyo International Conference on African Development have definitely decided on the issue of participation in the meetings in favor of the Sahrawi side after the failure of the Moroccan diplomacy to exclude the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic from the meeting. The details with Mohammed Khatil in this report.
The TICAD ministerial meeting wound up today with the adoption of a joint communique in which the participants definitively settled the issue of participation in TICAD meetings in favor of the Sahrawi side. The communique enshrines without any ambiguity and without any nuance the right of all member states of the African Union to take part in partnership meetings between Africa and Japan. By the expression member states of the African Union included in the first paragraph of this joint communique, it must be understood that Morocco's demand to exclude the Sahrawi Democratic Republic found no echo among the participants. In this regard, it must be noted, as this document also specifies that Morocco was the one and only country to have expressed reservations at the expression member states of the African Union having been unable to introduce its preferred formula, which is limiting participation on the African side to states recognized by the United Nations. This is considered as yet another failure of Moroccan diplomacy, which found itself completely isolated.
And the aggression by a Moroccan diplomat against the Sahrawi delegation participating in the preparatory meetings of the ministerial meeting of the Tokyo International Conference on African Development reveals Morocco's despair after its failure to exclude the Sahrawi Republic from bilateral meetings as part of the partnership and cooperation linking the African Union to other organizations and countries. Mohamed Khatilgan.
The partnerships linking the AU to various international actors is similar to the partnerships that the Continental Organization maintains with the Arab League, the European Union, and other countries and regional groupings. Throughout the preparatory period for the Tokyo meeting, Morocco tried in vain to convince its African allies and the host country of its thesis aimed at excluding the Sahrawi Republic, but all its attempts failed miserably, and the defeat suffered by Morocco can be described as humiliating when we see the Sahrawi Minister of Foreign Affairs participating with full prerogatives alongside his African counterparts in this meeting, even benefiting from personal protection provided by the host country, infuriated by the rogue diplomacy carried out by the Moroccan occupation. The Sahrawi ambassador to South Africa, Mohammed Islam Baysat, tells our radio more about the incident.
What
happened yesterday in Tokyo is the umpteenth evidence of the failure of the Moroccan diplomacy in convincing the world about the expansionist, colonialist and outdated thesis that they try to sell about Morocco. And in the face of their failure, they resort to violence, thugging and physical attacks. It's not something new, but rather a customary behavior instilled in the mentality and behavior of some Moroccan diplomats.
What emerged from the Tokyo meeting and previous experiences in the radical turn taken by Moroccan diplomacy, which is now inspired by the Zionist occupation in its attempts to stifle the struggle of the Sahrawi people for the exercise of their legitimate and inalienable rights to self-determination and independence. In addition to arrogance and cynicism, the Moroccan diplomacy has learned from the Zionist occupation not to respect any red line, whether diplomatic, political, ethical or moral, and adopt instead the policy of the end justifies the means, including the most abject ones.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International and to Sudan now. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres and the President of Sudan's Transitional Sovereign Council, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, have agreed on facilitating the movement of humanitarian aid into Sudan. And the details with Majid Mila.
The agreement was reached during a phone call between Guterres and al-Burhan, where they specifically discussed the movement of aid through the town of Adri. On August 16th, Sudan announced the opening of the Adri crossing on the border with Chad for 3 months after it was closed in February. The United Nations said it will also work with the Sudanese authorities to establish a simplified system for faster processing and delivery of aid. The agreement comes amid a dire humanitarian crisis in Sudan triggered by the ongoing conflict between the army and the rapid support paramilitary forces. Millions have been displaced and are in urgent need for food, water and medical supplies. The United Nations and aid agencies have repeatedly called for an unhindered access to deliver aid, but the fighting has hampered their efforts. The agreement with al-Burhan is seen as a positive step towards ensuring that much needed aid reaches those in need.
And 11 people have been killed in 2 regions of Ukraine in Russian bombardments, and 5 people have been killed in Ukrainian shelling in Russia over the last 24 hours. In the Ukrainian region of Donetsk, where most of the fighting is taking place, 7 people have died since Saturday. 15 people were also killed in the attacks on the Russian side. 5 people were killed in the Ukrainian shelling in the Belgorod region during the night. 13 people were also injured in Ukrainian shelling. And the current epidemic of Mpox can be controlled and stopped, stressed the Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom, as he announced an action plan providing for $135 million over the next 6 months. Mr. Ghebreyesus told member states that responding to this complex epidemic requires a global and coordinated international response as cases spread beyond Africa to Europe and Asia. The transmission is mainly concentrated in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where there have been more than 16,000 suspected cases, including 575 deaths this year alone. Still with the Mpox, the United Nations agencies have warned that children are particularly at risk of the new variant of monkeypox, raising concerns about the rise in cases among children in Africa. According to the United Nations Children Fund, UNICEF, children and vulnerable communities are bearing the brunt of an epidemic that is spreading across East Africa, Southern Africa and the Great Lakes region. The new variant of Mpox virus has been identified in several countries in the region, raising concerns because of its potential for wider transmission across age groups, particularly young children. UNICEF Regional Director for Eastern and Southern Africa, Itliva Kadili, called for special priority to be given to the needs of children in the fight against infection. She described the situation in Burundi as particularly alarming, where the number of infections has almost doubled in 1 week. Nearly 60% of cases have been detected in children and teenagers, and 1/5 of cases affected children under 5. As of August 2024, 170 confirmed cases of Mpox had been detected in 26 of the country's 49 districts, 45% of which are women. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. That's it for our news bulletin. I invite you now to listen to a cultural program compiled and presented by Jamet Salmani.